whole nuclear apocalypse and I die to a bear? That sucks. Well, time to go pop out a pine cone. Don't let that witch get you. Why would he say that? Oh no. And the cycle continues. Hold your breath, you're getting flushed back into the times of the Aztec Empire, a Mesoamerican civilization renowned for its vehemently violent and vicious nature. Or at least that's how history remembers it, and you're about to find yourself in the heart of it all. You've surfaced right outside of the capital city. Think you could survive? Well, they didn't, so maybe you could. Let's find out. Welcome to Tenochtitlan. Located in what is now Mexico City, Tenochtitlan was once a sprawling metropolis and one of the most populated cities in the whole world, home to over 200,000 people. Now, despite what you may think, the Aztec Empire is actually not that old. This is the year 1519, the historical height of the empire. That is, until... But anyway, you begin kicking your little arms and leggies to get to shore, assuming you can swim. After all, Tenochtitlan was built on a huge friggin' lake. Lake Texcoco to be precise. Why? Because religion makes you do illogical things. You see, way back around 1325, the Aztec people, who actually called themselves the Mexica, were tasked by their patron god Huitzilopochtli to find a promised land upon which to build a brand spanking new city. Huitzilopochtli apparently appeared in a priest dream to deliver a divine prophecy with his soothing, ethereal voice. After strenuous searching in the Mexico Valley, all while annoying the heck out of other indigenous groups, the weary wanderer's wayfare finally came to an end, on an island in the middle of a huge freaking lake. Since this was not prime real estate in the slightest, many of the surrounding Mesoamerican civilizations who already disliked the aggressive, violent, and invasive Mexica allowed them to stake their claim without protest, as building buildings on a lake was a fool's errand. Nonetheless, Tenochtitlan was built from the soggy ground up. Over the span of the next 100 years, the city had flourished into a central hub of trading, education, and innovation. At least for its inhabitants. You see, decade after decade, the Mexica terrorized the surrounding lands, embarking on brutal and bloody conquests. These invasions established and expanded the Aztec Empire across roughly 80,000 square miles, beginning in 1428 all the way up to 1519. And here you are, so you better get to surviving. You can start by lifting your sopping self out of the saline water and flopping on a dry land. But wouldn't you know it, the jig's already up as you've been spotted by a local farmer. And unless you've got some heavy Mesoamerican blood pumping through your veins, they're gonna think you look weird, meaning that they'll be cautious. Sure, you could probably take out anyone in a 100-mile radius with a comedically timed sneeze, but you're not here to rewrite history. Just suffer through it. That being the case, you attempt to speak with the locals using your superb linguistics knowledge.
Por favor, manténgase alejado de las puertas.
No, you dingbat, they don't speak Spanish. Spanish aren't even here yet. Try something else. You ponder to yourself, scratching your long chin hair. Well, now what? You're exactly right. The Mexica had their own language called now what? See that little TL at the end there? It sounds like a just a little right in the kind of like in this word. You've probably been saying this as axolotl or ajolote from my Spanish speakers, but it actually comes from the Nahuatl language. So it would be correctly pronounced as axolotl. Be sure to drop that tidbit of knowledge into group chat so your friends can start a new one without you. Anyway, only about 1.5 million people today can even speak Nahuatl, and I'm willing to bet that you're not one of them. So if I were you, I'd about axolit my pants cause you're an outsider. And this is the part where you get taken captive. Or worse. If you are taken alive, you'd certainly wish that you weren't, but at least on the way to your doom, you'd be able to get a glimpse into the wonders that Tenochtitlan had to offer. Surprise, surprise, another civilization, another hierarchy system. The social structure of the Aztec Empire is often debated, but it can be boiled down to your vanilla upper, middle, and lower classes. The big guy at the top is called the Tlatoani, or Supreme Emperor. The upper class, of course, is all your rich folk, your priests, your warriors, and your nobles. Next were the farmers, merchants, fishermen, and artisans making up the laboring middle class, and the poor unfortunate scum at the bottom were mostly slaves and prisoners of war. Upward movement through these classes was certainly possible, but certainly rare, so get to pulling on them bootstraps as soon as they're invented. But even if you were just a run-of-the-mill peasant, life wasn't terribly awful. Everyone knew that they needed to work to keep the wheels turning. Men tended to the farms, women tended to the homes, and the kids tended to their studies. The city itself was also super clean, relatively speaking. Accounts from the Spanish conquistadors noted the exceptional hygiene and cleanliness practiced by the Mexica. Big ol' Spanish ball of rage Hernan Cortez, who is currently on his way over from Spain to mop the floor with Aztec blood, noted the city's impressive public health innovations, including baths and toilets, and water fountains constantly supplied with fresh, clean water. There were even public servants scrubbing everything down on a daily basis. Waste was burned or recycled, and everyone's doo-doo feces fertilized the farms. That's good corn. Since personal hygiene was so ingrained in daily life, widespread disease was not an immediate threat. Yet, as long as there were no floods, droughts, volcanic eruptions, or earthquakes, life was pretty solid. The invention of sustainable, fertile floating farms called chinampas meant that food supply was fairly reliable. The local diet mainly consisted of vegetables or fruits. There's plenty of beans, greens, potatoes, tomatoes, there's corn if you're torn, a fish if you wish, or dry out some turkey for a jerky dish. You've got deer, duck, lizards, and dogs, but no cows, chickens, goats, or hogs. Grasshoppers, worms, larvae, or ants, all packed with protein, so give them a chance. There's lots of food just begging to be cooked, and no, there's no Chipotle out here. Trust me, I've looked. Alright, enough rhyming. Now you have to keep in mind that this sweet lifestyle was only within the city limits of Tenochtitlan. The Aztec Empire itself was huge, and at its height in 1519, the entire empire ruled over 500 city-states and about 6 million people. While the Mexica were the head honchos around these parts, the empire as a whole was actually a triple alliance of 3 main cities: Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan. But Tenochtitlan was the dominant power. Why? It's simple: fear. The Mexica were terrifyingly brutal and militaristic. Tenochtitlan was the promised land, remember, so they're gonna fight tooth and nail to defend what the gods have declared to be their home. So let's talk military. If you're going to be the main powerhouse of an empire and want to keep that empire from crumbling, you'd best believe that you need people who know how to fight. Surprisingly, Tenochtitlan itself had no standing professional military, so every male needed to be ready for a call to arms at a moment's notice in the event that a neighboring city starts getting all sassy. All male citizens in Tenochtitlan, regardless of class status, were required to go through rigorous warrior training at the age of 15. Intense daily exercise drills, marching formations, and weapon masteries were always on the menu. If you wanted to stab someone from a comfortable distance, you could always launch some arrows or huck a javelin. Close quarters combats called for clubs, spears, or this monstrosity, the maquahuitl. This was a wooden paddle adorned with razor-sharp obsidian stones, capable of ripping flesh from bone in a single swing. Its clever design allowed for 2 modes of operation: cutting if they were bad, and spanking if they were naughty. Although certainly capable of inflicting a crap ton of pain, the purpose of these weapons was not to necessarily kill, but to incapacitate. You see, the Mexica actually preferred to capture enemy warriors alive, for reasons we'll cut into later. But perhaps one of the most effective weapons for the Mexica was intimidation. The Mexica wore extravagant, colorful clothing designed to represent ferocious animals such as eagles, jaguars, and serpents. Sometimes full-on animal skins were used too, so imagine getting charged up by a screaming, hulked-out maniac dressed head to toe in jaguar skin. You'd just about invert yourself into a scared little raisin. So while Tenochtitlan had no standing army, it could call upon tens of thousands of trained soldiers at the drop of a hat. As a consequence of being conquered, all city-states within the Aztec Empire were forced to pay tribute to the Mexica, allowing them to maintain the healthy and wealthy lifestyle that you see before you as you're paraded through the city as a filthy prisoner. Failure to pay tribute meant certain death, so these cities were quick to offer up the goods, but of course, they were not happy about it. But none of that concerns you. Instead, you've been sent to court for the crime of being a strange-looking weirdo. Now, this can go one of two ways. Captured prisoners in the Aztec Empire either faced slavery or were offered up as a heavy metal sacrifice to the gods, the latter of which being the highest honor. But let's start with... Believe it or not, being a slave under Aztec rule wasn't the worst because it wasn't really a system of oppression. Aztec slaves fell more into the category of indentured servitude instead of what we would think of as full-blown lifelong slavery. Slaves had basic rights, could marry freely, own land, and could even earn their freedom from their owners under the right conditions. I use the term owners here loosely, as they didn't outright own the person, just their labor. Owners were responsible for providing adequate food, shelter, and care for their slaves, and were even forbidden from mistreating them. And funny enough, if you could prove before a court that your owner was being a real asshat, you could most likely earn your freedom. If your owner was being extra dickish with verbal or physical lashings, they might even end up a slave themselves. Mexica criminal punishments went from 0 to 100 real quick. Victims of your petty crimes would have you provide financial compensation or you being enslaved to them to work off the debt. If you did something more serious, prepare to be publicly strangled or beaten to death with a big old stick or some rocks. If you were a real bad boy, you'd be promoted to sacrifice, all of which are pretty effective crime deterrents. But not all slaves were criminals or prisoners. In fact, some were even volunteers. Yeah, some citizens chose to become slaves in order to work off a debt. After that debt had been paid, the contract was complete and both parties went about their merry way, satisfied with the transaction. Remember that physical labor is backbreaking, but debt is crippling. As for work, slaves were mainly assigned to complete domestic chores by their owners. Scrub the walls, scrub the halls, scrub my balls? Now, of course, sometimes the involuntary slaves, such as yourself, weren't as willing to participate in paying off their debt to society. Since slave owners were not permitted to sell their slaves without said slave's consent, they were in a bind. So it was time to return the favor using a wooden collar. Not only was this collar one of shame, but also inconvenience. Besides looking completely humiliating, it also had a tactical purpose. You see, there was this strange rule that if a slave was able to flee, exit the city, and, I shit you not, step on a human turd, they could request freedom before a court.
Ugh, you didn't clean your foot, did you?
I did not. But since slave owners knew this silly rule, any slaves who were flight risks were given the collar, reducing their mobility in large crowds and doorways.
I just want to go inside.
You can also choose to no longer become a slave by marrying or having babies with your owner. But then you're back to square one. Any slaves who continued to be troublemakers for their owners were given 3 warnings before being eligible to be sold as a sacrifice to the temples, should their owner permit. And he just did. Oh, sucks to be you right now. You're about to become a... Welcome to the Hueyi Teocalli, also known as the Templo Mayor, the main temple in the heart of Tenochtitlan and the religious epicenter of many a sacrifice. It's also precisely where your heart is going to see sunlight for the first time in... ever. Religious societies can be pretty bloodthirsty. Just ask the Catholics. And the Mexica were no different. They firmly believed that their gods were fueled by blood offerings. For example, they believed that their patron sun god, Huitzilopochtli, required human blood to fight off the moon and stars at night to bring about a new day. So you can bet your beating chambers that blood flowed quite literally like there was no tomorrow. With over 200 different gods in the Aztec pantheon, it's quite a lot of mouths to feed. Harvested blood would be poured over statues of the gods while it was still fresh so they could get a little sip. Who's a hungry boy? You are. Warriors, of course, had the best tasting blood, right behind prisoners and children, so they were given priority over everyone else, making them a hot commodity. In order to keep supplies stocked, the Mexica would often host events called flower wars where at least 2 cities would send out troops to fight one another for the sake of capturing POWs for sacrifice. It's a real win-win. Now, when you think of Aztec human sacrifice, your mind probably goes straight to the iconic heart gripping and ripping, and you'd be right. Slapping a slave on a sacrificial slab and serving a swift stab to the sternum for the sudden surge of that sweet sanguine secretion. But when sacrifices were such a spectacle, variety was the spice of life. If you've seen one heart out of a human body, you've seen them all. Thanks, LiveLeak. Many methods of sacrifice were specific to each god. You want some rain? Drown some crying kiddos in a nearby lake for the rain god. Want to keep volcanic eruptions at bay? You better burn some women for the fire god. You want a bountiful harvest? We've got decapitation and flaying for the god of agriculture. Enthusiastic priests would even go as far as wearing the flayed skin just for that extra bit of pizzazz. The problem with these kinds of practices is that eventually it's going to rain again, volcanoes will have dormant periods, and some harvests will naturally provide higher yields. So if things turned out well, it's because the sacrifices worked. If they didn't, that's because you didn't sacrifice enough. You can see how this is a terrible feedback loop. Sometimes though, sacrifices were performed on a large scale to slake a large thirst. For example, the grand opening ceremony of the Templo Mayor allegedly saw the blood of over 80,000 captives and slaves pour down the freshly carved stone, though historians do debate if this number is even accurate. What's not up for debate though, is what's about to happen to you. Say adios to that heart of yours, buddy.
Stop!
Cortez! Oh, am I glad to see you. Necesito ir the fuck home. Comprende? Where the fuck were you?